else, you shouldn't listen to them for 5 minutes, because that's stupid. But of course not really. It's just a way of focusing you on the only thing they have that looks good. Let's take a look at unemployment. It is lower than it has been before. But I want to remind you, because I know this is a bit of a technical thing, unemployment is measured basically in the United States in the following way. Questions are asked. Random people are selected, and they're asked a question. Are you working? If you answer, yes, I'm working, you're counted as an employed person. If you answer, no, I'm not working, you are asked the second question. Are you looking for work? If you answer yes, you're considered unemployed. If you answer no, I'm not looking, you are not considered to be part of the labor force, and you're not counted at all. Which means if in 1 month, there are, let's say, 1 million people that say, I'm looking for a work, but the next month when they're asked, they say, I've given up. There is no work, I'm not looking anymore. The unemployment rate will collapse because they're not anymore looking. But this isn't because the economy is great, it's the opposite. It's the economy is so poor that we measure that. It's called the labor force participation rate. It's the percentage of people in working age who are either working or looking for work. And we are lower now than we were 5 years ago. So part of the unemployment improvement isn't an improvement, it's a deterioration because people have given up. Young people who decide to go to school figuring I'll get a more credential and I'll have a better shot. Poor folks that they are who think like that. Or old people who give up. Or people who decide they can do better in the illegal economy than they can in the... I'm sure there's nobody in this room who could imagine such a thing, but there are people like that, millions of them, and more each day because the illegal is a better shot for income in many cases than the legal. So this unemployment number is a mirage, and even if it were true, it's just part of the story. I'm going to give you some other statistics to look at, just to give you an idea. A recent study that I produce in the Twitters and memes that we send out from Democracy at Work. A recent study of an association here in the United States indicated that people over 65 who live alone, so this is mostly women because of women living longer than men anyway. People in the United States over 65 living alone, 50% of them, ready? Have insufficient income for minimal subsistence. 50% of people over 65 who are living in a couple, they're both around, the number is 23%. So roughly a quarter of our older people in couples and half of our older people living alone are economically insecure. They can't make it. And that takes into account Social Security and whatever else they have. What kind of an economy is great that has the statistics like that? Let me give you another. Well, I gave you two already. General Motors in China, that's a very serious problem coming down. Borden, the milk, a very serious debt problem. Now I want to talk about debt. And this is a wonderful example of the craziness that capitalism is. This system which, when we're all dead, 200 years from now, people will look back on this system and say, what was wrong with the people who lived like that? It's like when some of us read, I don't know, about medieval, I'm going to pick a country, Albania, and then you read stories of good religious people beating themselves over the back. Remember, you know those stories, the flagellation with twigs to beat the sinfulness out of themselves. I don't mean to upset anyone who's still engaged in that sort of thing. We don't do that physically. We use mental mechanisms to achieve the same effect. Anyway, we wonder to ourselves, gee, whoa, what did people do like that? Well, they're going to look back at us. And here's what they're going to see. Capitalism crashes in 2008 and 9, as I've already told you. And because of the anxiety that it becomes a general depression and all that that would mean, the Federal Reserve comes in and drops interest rates drastically to zero, or as I said, even sometimes to negative. Well, what does that do? Well, it's a wonderful signal to every possible person, every business, every individual, every government. You now have an opportunity you've never had before. You can get free money, money you don't have to pay any interest for. If you have a problem in your business, go borrow some free money. It's an easier way of solving it than all the other options you have to solve your problem. Every government that doesn't know, for example, all those governments that were stimulating their economy, they didn't want to tax people to get that stimulus going. That would have been self-defeating. So they borrowed the money. Why? Because the interest rate's so cheap. Of course we can do this. So everybody borrowed. Everybody borrowed to solve whatever economic problem they had. Big business, small business, medium, big government, local government, regional government, individuals, you, me, all of us. A generation of young people looking at a job market that really stinks, went to schools that they might otherwise not have gone to, and they couldn't afford it. So they borrowed the money to get the degree, to get through the school, in a desperate hope not to be left out of a declining economy that isn't great. If it were great, you wouldn't be so desperate. So everybody borrowed. You know what that means? It means that today, governments, corporations, and the people are having levels of debt we've never seen before in the modern world. No one has ever seen this. And you know what that means? It means that when there's a downturn, which capitalism has every 47 years on average, for the last 200 years, without exception. That's an average, so it varies, but downturns, now the downturn is going to have a whole new quality. It doesn't just mean company A goes out of business, because company A is up to here in debt, which means when it goes out of business, it can't pay back the loans to whoever lent it money, who is now going to be dragged down by the downturn. Even if the downturn happened over here in milk, you're a bank over there who lent to the milk company, and you're dead because they can't pay you back. We have no idea how to manage that. We've never been in that situation. An economy leveled up, or leveraged as we call it, with debt like this, is an economy that isn't great. It's an economy that's very vulnerable in a very dangerous way. I could go on, but I think the point is made. To call this economy great is a pure political ploy designed to get him reelected, which is what the assassination of that general in Iraq was too. It's the same issue. Next, why is capitalism now struggling between tariffs, trade wars, and all of that? This is a very important issue, which is now going to become well known. It's been a bit below the surface for a while, but it will now emerge. Capitalism has always had this kind of problem. On the one hand, in every capitalist economy, like the United States, there are businesses that want free trade. They want the world to be open so that they can produce whatever they want to produce over here, where it's cheapest to produce it, ship it over there to store it, and then move it over there to sell it. They want freedom to move and get the best price for their inputs and the best price for their outputs. It's like General Motors that wants to produce cars in China for the Chinese market. It's Pepsi-Cola, which makes more profit from the soda pop it produces outside the United States than what it does inside, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those companies want free trade. But then there are a whole other bunch of companies that don't want it. Why? Because they suffer from the ability of other countries to produce stuff more profitably and bring it here. They want, ready? Protection. That's what it's called. Protection economics. They want a barrier, a tariff. Let me give you an example. Sometime over the next 3 or 4 days, the United States and France will reach an agreement, or not, about the tariffs Mr. Trump wants to impose. By the way, for some of you, this may be an important piece of information, on French cheese and French wine and French brandy and all the rest of it. Why? Well, it's part of Mr. Trump's demonstration that he's tough and not letting the French people cheat us, and all of that boring rhetoric. But here's the people who like this. Napa Valley. Because if there's a tariff of 25% on French wine, that's the price. When you go to the liquor store, the French wine section of the liquor store, those prices are going to go up because that liquor store has to pay part of the cost of this tariff. The wines from Napa don't go up there. They're not subject to the tariff. So this is a way of shifting the business from the French wine or the Italian wine or the Australian wine or wherever the tariffs are hit to the American alternative. It gets even more complicated because if you do it to the French but you don't do it to the Italians, well, then it hurts France. Its exports to America drop, but the Italians don't mind because they're exempted from it. So now we get an immense amount, ready, of political horse trading. Everybody is fighting to have a tariff or to not have a tariff. If a tariff is passed, to get an exemption from the tariff. It's an endless process of stuff. That's all this is. Don't be fooled by endless claims, tariffs will help America. That is, I'm going to use a technical term in economics, bullshit. Okay? What it is, it hurts certain capitalists if you raise a tariff. It hurts other capitalists if you lower. The ones who benefit from lowering want it lowered, and their lobbyists are busy in Washington and everywhere getting that. And the outcome depends on who's got more money to hire how many lobbyists to win. That's what the outcome is. It has nothing to do with efficiency, nothing to do with America. Nobody cares. It's irrelevant. This is a fight between two groups of capitalists. That's what it always was. But the winners and the losers will change the economic environment we live in. You can see an explosion of wine being produced in America if you block the wines from Europe, or you cannot.